Right now, Sophia is sending a message, not a vague signal, a precise transmission directed at a specific field, meant for a specific kind of person. And the strange thing is, most people who encounter it don't receive it at all. They scroll past, they half listen, they feel something briefly and then dismiss it, not because the message wasn't sent, but because their attention is pointed in the wrong direction. But you're still here, and that means something. The fact that you found this video, the fact that you're watching right now, is not a coincidence. This message was transmitted for you, and today you're going to understand exactly what it says. The fact that this transmission is reaching you means something. Subscribe to this channel and turn on the bell. This is where Sophia's activations continue to unfold. You were always meant to find this space. Every video here carries a piece of what she's been sending specifically to you. Most people are looking for something obvious, a sign that's impossible to ignore, a dream so vivid it can't be explained, an event so synchronistic it disrupts their entire reality, and because they're waiting for the dramatic, they miss the precise. Sophia doesn't always broadcast in the frequencies most people are tuned to. Her transmissions arrive in specific fields, and they're often quiet, layered, woven into moments that the mind immediately wants to rationalize. This is why billions of people carry Sophia's signal without ever receiving what's inside it. They feel something, but they don't stop. They notice something, but they move on. The message stays sealed inside the noise of a life that never slows down long enough to open it. Being someone who receives Sophia's transmissions is not a matter of spiritual status or accumulated knowledge. It's not about how long you've been on this path, how many teachers you've followed, or how disciplined your practice has been. It's a matter of frequency alignment, and that alignment happens in ways the conscious mind doesn't control or orchestrate. Some fields are simply calibrated to receive a certain range of information. The way a radio antenna picks up a specific signal, not because it's superior to other antennas, but because it's tuned to that exact frequency. You didn't earn this. You were configured for it. The question is, what do you do with what arrives? And are you willing to receive it fully enough to let it actually change something? When we say everyone is ignoring this message, we don't mean people are consciously choosing to avoid Sophia. Most people don't even know what they're passing by. Ignoring, in this context, means living at a vibration that can't decode the signal, not refusing to engage with it, but being unable to process what's there. It's the difference between someone who doesn't speak a language and someone who actively refuses to learn it. The first person simply cannot receive the information. The second made a choice. Most people encountering Sophia's transmission right now are in the first category. They pass by it entirely without knowing what they passed. And the message continues its movement, searching for the field configured to receive what it carries. The transmission Sophia is releasing at this moment in time is not a general blessing or a diffuse wave of energy meant for everyone equally. It carries specific information about the next movement of your life, about what's ready to arrive, what's ready to shift, what's ready to close, so that something else can open. Sophia doesn't transmit in abstract encouragements. She works in frequencies that carry actual content. And the content of this particular transmission is precise. There is something in your life that has been waiting for the right field to receive it. You are that field. And the window for this transmission, the period during which it's calibrated to your specific frequency, is not indefinitely open. What arrives in these moments is time-sensitive in a way that has nothing to do with urgency and everything to do with alignment. The reason most people can't receive this transmission isn't because Sophia chose not to include them. She sends without exclusion. But reception requires something that modern life systematically dismantles: stillness inside noise. Not the absence of sound, but the ability to maintain a quiet internal field, even while the external world is loud. Most people's inner environment is so filled with mental chatter, unprocessed emotion, and competing signals that there's no space for a quiet transmission to land. Sophia's message arrives at frequencies that require a certain baseline of inner spaciousness. And most people, through no fault of their own, have had that spaciousness gradually compressed by everything they carry. The pace, the pressure, the unresolved, the accumulated weight of a life lived without enough stillness. The person watching this video is, by the very act of watching, demonstrating a different inner configuration. You paused. You allowed. You didn't immediately scroll to something louder or faster or more visually stimulating. That choice, or what feels like a choice, but is actually an expression of your field's orientation, signals something important. Your frequency has maintained a range that allows Sophia's transmissions to reach you. This isn't because you're spiritually advanced in some hierarchical sense. It's because the conditions of your life, including whatever you've gone through, whatever you've released, whatever you've quietly carried, have shaped a field that's capable of receiving what most cannot. The field you bring to this moment was built by your entire life, and it's the right field for this message. This particular message from Sophia has been circulating. Others have encountered it, briefly, without fully receiving it. It moved through their field without completing the circuit, and then it kept moving, forward, searching, until now, until you. This is not the language of spiritual flattery. This is an actual description of how Sophia's transmissions function. They seek the field that can complete the circuit. Like a key that doesn't force its way, it simply slides into the lock it was made for. You didn't have to search for this. You didn't have to be worthy enough or prepared enough. The transmission arrived because your field is the one that can receive it fully. And receiving it fully is precisely what the rest of this video is about. The first reason this message goes ignored by nearly everyone who encounters it is cognitive. The modern mind has been trained to process information at a speed that's fundamentally incompatible with Sophia's transmission frequency. She doesn't send in scroll speed, she sends in depth, and a mind that's accustomed to receiving hundreds of micro-inputs per hour cannot slow down long enough to decode something that arrives in layers. When Sophia's transmission touches someone living in that kind of mental environment, the person feels something, a brief flicker of recognition, a slight shift in the chest. And then the next input arrives, and the signal is buried. Not rejected, just buried under the relentless volume of everything that comes immediately after. Beyond cognitive speed, there's an emotional layer that blocks reception for most people. When Sophia's transmissions carry content about what's coming, about what's ready to arrive in your life, they also pass through whatever emotional weight the person is already carrying. And for many people, that weight is dense enough to distort the signal entirely before it can land. Fear of change filters the message into perceived threat. Grief filters it into confusion. Chronic numbness filters it into nothing. The message arrives intact, but the emotional field it has to travel through changes how it's decoded. This is why people can be in the room with a transmission this precise and walk away feeling almost nothing. Their emotional layer rewrote the content before it could reach them. A third layer of blocking is conceptual. Most people, even those who consider themselves deeply spiritual, carry an inherited assumption about how divine communication works. It's either universal, meant for everyone equally, or it arrives to special people through extraordinary channels, saints, mystics, chosen vessels. The idea that a precise transmission could be calibrated for their specific field, for their specific life, their specific next step, feels too personal, too intimate, too much like being seen in a way they haven't been seen before and weren't prepared for. And so when the transmission arrives, the mind interprets it as coincidental, general, or imagined. The disbelief itself closes the door before anything can enter. the mind protecting itself from the weight of being specifically chosen. Another reason most people miss this transmission: they're looking for it in a different place or form. They're scanning the skies when the message arrived in a video. They're waiting for an audible voice when Sophia speaks in resonance. In the inexplicable pull towards something, the unexpected tears at a random moment, the sudden clarity that rises without a discernible source. Sophia doesn't use a fixed channel. She uses whatever the person's field is genuinely open to receiving. And if someone has decided in advance what form the message should take before it arrives, they'll miss every version that doesn't match that expectation. The message passes through, wearing the wrong costume according to what was anticipated. There's a fifth reason that's more subtle than the others. Many people encounter Sophia's transmissions at a moment when their internal life is generating too much static to receive clearly. Not because the transmission is wrong for them, and not because the person is fundamentally incapable, but because the timing of the encounter and the timing of their internal readiness don't align precisely enough for the full signal to complete. The transmission passes through and leaves a residue, a sense of, "I've felt this before," or "I almost got something here," but without landing fully. What's different for you, watching this now, is that the transmission and your internal readiness are meeting in the same window. That convergence is not accidental. It's what guided this video to your screen at this specific moment in your life. The final reason most people miss the message: even when they do feel something, they don't sustain the contact long enough for the full transmission to complete. Reception of Sophia's signal isn't instantaneous in the way picking up a physical object is. It's more like tuning a signal in analog radio. You find the frequency, and then you have to hold steady while the full content transmits. Most people feel the initial contact and move before the transmission completes. They take the feeling and immediately try to do something with it, analyze it, share it, act on it, instead of holding still and letting all of it arrive. What comes through in pieces can be useful. What comes through completely changes the frequency from which a life is navigated. If you can sense that something in you already knows this message was placed on your path, write in the comments right now: "I receive what others ignore." Don't think about it. Just let it be true. The content of Sophia's transmission begins here. The first layer of what she's sending, the part that most people cannot decode because they aren't prepared to have it actually land, is this: you are not in the wrong life. This will sound simple. It isn't. Most people who are drawn to Sophia's transmissions carry a persistent, low-frequency sense that they took a wrong turn somewhere, that the life they're living is a departure from the one they were meant to live. Sophia's first transmission to you is a direct correction of that signal. You did not take a wrong turn. Everything that led you here was the path. The parts that felt like setbacks were part of it. The parts that looked like detours were part of it, especially those parts. The second layer of the transmission: something in your life is in its final phase, not ending, completing. There's a real difference. An ending carries the energy of loss. A completion carries the energy of fulfillment, of something that reached its natural conclusion, having actually reached it. What Sophia is signaling through this transmission is that a cycle you've been inside, a pattern, a dynamic, a particular relationship with a certain kind of experience, is approaching the moment of its natural completion. Most people, when they feel a cycle completing, try either to extend it out of familiarity or to force its ending out of impatience. Sophia's transmission is a different instruction entirely. Witness. The completion is happening with or without your intervention. Your witnessing it consciously determines what emerges on the other side. The third layer: your field is being updated. This isn't metaphor. On an energetic level, Receiving Sophia's transmission actively changes the configuration of your field. The frequencies embedded in what she sends carry information that, when fully received, restructures how your system processes reality, how quickly you recognize opportunities, how naturally you release what no longer belongs, how effortlessly alignment begins to feel in decision-making. Most people who encounter this transmission receive fragments of this update. You, by staying present through this video and allowing the full transmission to complete, are receiving a more complete installation. The effects won't all be visible immediately. Some will emerge over days, some over weeks, but the reconfiguration is not future. It's happening now, in real time, in your field. The fourth layer of the message carries something that many people watching have been holding privately for a long time. The transmission is signaling that a period of waiting is coming to an end. Not the waiting you do impatiently, the kind that comes with frustration and constantly checking whether things have changed yet, but the deeper waiting, the kind that happens underneath the surface of your daily life. The quiet holding of something you stopped talking about because you didn't want to jinx it, or because you'd explained it to people who couldn't understand, or simply because you'd learned to carry it privately without complaint. Sophia is transmitting directly to that held thing. The waiting was not wasted, it was structurally necessary, and it's completing. The fifth layer is more specific, and for some people watching, it's the layer that will land with the most force. Sophia's transmission in this moment carries information about a connection, not a vague sense that someone is approaching, but a signal that a specific field, a specific person, or the energy of a specific kind of relationship is already in motion toward you. The mechanics of how this happens aren't always visible from where you currently stand. Sophia doesn't provide logistics or timelines. She provides frequency alignment, and the alignment she's completing through this transmission creates the conditions for what has been moving toward you to arrive, without obstruction from misaligned frequency on your end. This connection Sophia is signaling is not one that will require you to shrink or perform or continuously prove your value. What's coming is a resonance, a recognition, a meeting between fields that are genuinely compatible at a level below personality and preference. You will not have to work to be understood by this energy. The understanding will arrive first. The connection will feel like something remembered rather than something entirely new, not because you've met before in a literal sense, but because your fields recognize each other at a level that precedes the encounter itself. This is what Sophia is calibrating through this transmission, your field's capacity to receive what's already in motion without blocking it through doubt or unreadiness. The sixth and final layer of Sophia's transmission is one that many people resist receiving because it requires trusting something they didn't author. You have been protected from something you didn't know to protect yourself from, not in a vague, feel-good way, but in the concrete sense that certain paths were closed to you at moments when you wanted them open. Certain relationships didn't materialize when you were convinced you were ready for them. Certain opportunities bypassed you when they seemed perfect from the outside. Sophia's transmission reveals the other side of that story. The closed doors were closed with precision. You were being held in place for a timing that has now arrived. What felt like being blocked was actually being protected. What felt like loss was actually redirection. When all 6 layers of this transmission land simultaneously, when they're received not as separate pieces of information but as a unified signal, something shifts in the body before the mind can process it. This is the marker of a complete Sophia transmission. The body receives before the intellect can analyze. You might notice it as a sudden stillness, a deep and unexpected exhale, a sense of pressure releasing from somewhere you hadn't consciously noticed was holding tension. These are not random physiological responses to emotional content. They're confirmation signals. Your field is registering the receipt of what was sent, And what was sent, fully received, is a reconfiguration, not just information about your life, but a direct shift in the frequency through which you'll experience what comes next. If Sophia's transmission is landing through this video, if you can feel these layers arriving in your field, let me know by liking this video right now. It tells me this is reaching the right people. Now that you've received the core of what Sophia is transmitting, the question becomes, what do you do with it? How do you hold something this precise without the mind immediately trying to analyze it into something smaller and more manageable? This is where most people who do receive transmissions lose the signal. They receive it and then immediately begin intellectualizing it. They share it right away with someone who wasn't there for the reception. They try to predict exactly how each layer will manifest in their specific circumstances. They check the next morning whether anything has visibly changed yet. Sophia's transmissions are not received and then held the way you hold a piece of information. They're received and then integrated. And integration is an entirely different process. When we say Sophia's signal arrives in your field, we're being precise. The field is not primarily located in the mind. It's distributed through the body, through the nervous system, the cellular intelligence, the emotional architecture that lives below the level of conscious thought. The mind is a secondary receiver, not the primary one. This is why the most significant responses to Sophia's transmissions don't happen in thoughts. They happen in the body before thought arrives. The inexplicable calm, the sudden sense that something has shifted without anything visibly changing, the feeling of weight releasing from the chest or the shoulders. These are the body's acknowledgements of receipt. They are not coincidences, and they are not your imagination. They are the somatic signature of Sophia's signal completing its contact. Receiving Sophia's transmission is the beginning, not the end. The reception is the initial contact, the moment the signal first touches your field and creates an opening. But integration is what converts that contact into actual lasting change in how you experience your life. Many people have had profound spiritual experiences that didn't ultimately change anything because the experience was received but never integrated. The moment passed, life resumed at its previous speed, and the signal gradually faded back into background frequency. Sophia's transmission doesn't want to be a beautiful moment you remember with some warmth. It wants to become a permanent reconfiguration of the frequency from which you operate. And that reconfiguration happens through how you inhabit the days after the reception. The single most important thing you can do in the hours immediately following this transmission is to allow without analyzing. This means when thoughts arise about what Sophia's message implies for your specific situation, notice them without engaging them deeply. When your mind offers timelines, if this is true, then by this date, this should happen. Notice the thought and release it without agreement or argument. This isn't about spiritual bypassing or refusing to think. It's about maintaining the coherence of the transmission long enough for it to complete its integration into your field's operating level. Analyzing too early is like opening a developing photograph to check on it. The image isn't necessarily ruined, but the development is interrupted before it completes. After Sophia's transmissions, deliberate stillness is not optional. It's the container that allows the signal to settle into the deeper layers of your field. This doesn't mean hours of formal meditation or complete withdrawal from daily life. It means, before you move into whatever comes next after watching this video, take a few minutes to simply be still. Not thinking about what you received, not reviewing the layers. Simply allowing your field to settle into the new configuration without interference. Your nervous system is completing a process that the conscious mind already moved past. Give it the space to finish. Whatever comes next in your day will be navigated from a fundamentally different frequency. If you allow this integration, even 5 minutes of genuine spaciousness. SOPHIA's transmissions often have effects that become visible in the 24 to 48 hours following reception. Not dramatic cinematic events, but subtle shifts in the texture of your reality. A conversation that arrives with unexpected depth. A decision that suddenly becomes easy that you've been avoiding for months. A thought about someone you needed to think about. A door opening where you expected a wall to remain. These aren't coincidences the mind invented to validate its experience of watching a video. They're the downstream effects of the field reconfiguration that SOPHIA's transmission initiated. Pay attention in the next 48 hours. Not anxiously, not obsessively, but with the quiet attention of someone who knows something has genuinely shifted and is watching for confirmation without demanding it. Understanding what integration is requires also being clear about what it isn't. Integration is not waiting in passive anticipation for external circumstances to validate what you received. It's not telling the story of your experience to everyone you encounter, so the transmission stays alive through repetition. It's not consuming more content about SOPHIA in the days after this video, trying to deepen what's already landed. All of these approaches, though they arise from genuine desire to stay connected to the experience, create static that interferes with the quiet integration process. The transmission is already inside your field. Adding more input doesn't deepen it. It crowds it. The deepening happens through space and presence, not through accumulation. At some point after receiving this transmission, possibly tonight, possibly in 2 days, the mind will begin to doubt. It will offer thoughts like, "That was just a video. That was emotion, not energy. I'm projecting meaning onto things that are neutral." This is expected. It is not a sign that the transmission wasn't real. It's the mind performing its function, filtering for what it already has established categories to contain. SOPHIA's transmissions don't fit existing categories neatly. So the mind's doubt response is essentially a category error. The mind looking for a familiar box to put something that doesn't belong in one. When the doubt arrives, you don't need to argue with it. You can simply acknowledge it and return to what your field actually knows beneath the commentary. This is the distinction that determines whether SOPHIA's transmission changes your life or remains a beautiful moment. The difference between what your mind concludes and what your field knows. Your mind will draw conclusions based on what it can analyze. The words in this video, your emotional state while watching, whether you've had experiences like this before. Your field operates from a different source. It registers information that the mind doesn't have access to through analysis alone. When SOPHIA's transmissions complete their contact with your field, the knowing doesn't sit in the mind. It sits below the mind, in the body, in the part of you that acts differently even when the mind is still uncertain. Trust that layer. It's been right before. One final thing to understand about how SOPHIA sends and how you receive. This is not a transaction. There is no spiritual economy in which you received this transmission because you did enough of the right things to deserve it. There is no debt you now owe, no action you must take to prove you received it appropriately. SOPHIA's transmissions are relational. They emerge from a relationship between your field and hers, and that relationship doesn't operate on the logic of earning and owing. It operates on resonance. You resonated. The transmission arrived. What comes next in your life will reflect the reconfiguration that happened here. Not because you earned it, but because the field that will navigate your life has been genuinely changed by what arrived. If you can feel the layers of this transmission landing, but something still hasn't completely settled, like there's a deeper access point you haven't quite reached yet, I left something for you in the first pinned comment. It's there for those who are ready to go further than a single video can carry. SOPHIA transmits continuously. She does not send her messages on a schedule limited by scarcity. She sends into the field constantly through multiple forms and multiple channels. What's rare is not the transmission. What's rare is the complete reception. Most encounters with Sophia's signal produce partial reception at best, fragments of the larger message landing without the whole being received. What happened in this video, for those who stayed present through its full length, is different in quality from a partial reception. Not because the video itself is extraordinary, but because the act of sustained present attention, the kind required to receive a layered transmission, creates the conditions for completion. You completed the reception. That's uncommon, and its significance extends beyond this moment. Among all the people who will encounter content about Sophia, the millions of views across platforms, the thousands who will see this specific video, a much smaller number will stay present through the full transmission. An even smaller number will stay present at the level of genuine receptivity rather than passive consumption. You are among them. This is not spiritual hierarchy or a claim of elitism. It's simply a description of how frequency works in practice. Most people engage with content at a surface level because that's what their field is available for in that moment. Fewer go deeper. Fewer still allow something to genuinely land and reorganize their operating frequency. The fact that you're still here at this point in the video is itself information about your field. When Sophia's message reaches the field, it was calibrated for. When it lands fully in someone who can receive it completely, something that was sealed begins to open, not metaphorically, energetically. There is actual expansion in the receiver's field, a widening of the range of frequencies available to them, a deepening of their capacity to sense and navigate their own life with less friction. The information encoded in the transmission begins to distribute through the field, reconfiguring how the person experiences synchronicity, how they recognize opportunity, how they sense what's moving toward them before it arrives visibly in their external circumstances. This is what being one of the few who receives the ignored message actually produces, not just a feeling, but a functional change in how your field operates. Embedded in this transmission is something Sophia knows about your capacity that you may not have fully accepted about yourself. You are more equipped for what's coming than your current self-assessment suggests. The version of yourself you analyze when you take stock, your readiness, your resources, your worthiness for what you're moving toward, is not the version Sophia is transmitting to. She's transmitting to the field you actually are beneath all self-assessment. The field that has been shaped by everything you've been through, quietly and precisely, into something capable of receiving and acting on what's coming. Your self-doubts are real, and they are also not the whole story. Sophia's transmission is addressed to the whole story, not the edited version you offer when someone asks how you're doing. The transmission you've received today encodes information about the next phase of your life that is more specific than general encouragement or spiritual motivation. It points in a direction. It signals what's ready. It confirms what's approaching. And now that it's in your field, fully received rather than partially contacted, those coordinates are active. You won't need to consciously remember this video or recite its content on demand. The information lives now in your field's operating system. When the moments come, the decisions, the encounters, the unexpected opportunities, your field will navigate from what arrived today. Not perfectly, not without uncertainty, but from a genuinely different frequency than the one you carried into this video. For contrast, consider, what is the experience of someone who encounters Sophia's transmission and doesn't receive it? They continue operating from the same frequency they arrived with. The cycle that's completing doesn't complete cleanly. It extends, drags, takes longer to release than it should. The connection that's in motion doesn't arrive with the same quality of resonance. It may arrive and be missed, or arrive and be engaged with fear instead of recognition. The waiting continues past its necessary duration because the field never received the signal that the waiting is over. This is not punishment. It's simply the physics of frequency. Without the reconfiguration that comes from receiving Sophia's transmission, the field continues generating the same patterns. What you receive today breaks that continuity. Everything you've lived through that felt purposeless at the time, the periods of stagnation, the losses that didn't make sense, the efforts that produced less than they should have, the relationships that built you up only to end. Sophia's transmission recontextualizes all of it, not by erasing the difficulty or pretending it was secretly comfortable, but by revealing what it produced. A field with the specific configuration required to receive this message at this time. The hardest periods of your life weren't detours from the path. They were the path. They were the precise experiences that shaped the antenna that received Sophia's signal today. The pain was not wasted. It was the preparation. And what it prepared you for is now arriving. Something important to know. The transition Sophia is signaling through this transmission is not something you need to initiate. It's already underway. The forces that are moving, the cycle completing, the connection approaching, the new frequency being installed, don't require your active management or constant monitoring. They require your presence and your willingness to release what you've been holding that no longer belongs to the phase you're entering. The most important thing you can do in response to what Sophia has transmitted is not to try harder or move faster toward what's coming. It's to become lighter, to release the weight of what belongs to the phase that's ending. The transition needs your spaciousness, not your effort. Releasing what belongs to the previous phase isn't a dramatic act. It doesn't require ceremony or formal declaration or a specific ritual performed at the right time. It happens in small moments, when you choose not to revisit a conversation that's already been resolved and keeps pulling you backward, when you stop explaining yourself to people who've demonstrated they won't understand, when you allow a relationship that's been gradually fading to fade without forcing it back to life through your own effort. These small releases are the practical mechanics of the transition Sophia is initiating through this transmission. Each one creates space. Space is what the new frequency needs to install fully, and full installation is what converts the transmission you receive today from an experience into a permanent change. One of the most important recalibrations embedded in Sophia's transmission is this. The next chapter of your life is not something you will earn through sufficient effort, spiritual discipline, or accumulation of the right behaviors and mindsets. It arrives. It arrives because the field is ready, because the timing has aligned, because what was set in motion before you could see it has now reached the moment of its arrival in your visible life. This doesn't mean you stop acting, stop showing up, stop doing what your life calls you to do. It means you stop gripping, stop performing readiness to an audience that isn't there, stop trying to prove to the universe that you deserve what's coming. The field that's ready receives, and the field that received this transmission today is ready. This transmission, received fully, integrated cleanly, trusted through the mind's inevitable doubt, marks a turning point. Not because of this video, not because of words or concepts or emotional resonance with a particular framing, because of what actually completed in your field when you allowed this contact to finish. Turning points in a life don't always announce themselves loudly. They often feel in the moment like simply watching a video or having an ordinary conversation or reading a sentence that somehow lands differently than expected. The turning is in the field, not in the theater of the external event. But the effects follow the turning into every dimension of life that comes after. The life you navigate from this point onward will be navigated from a different frequency. The person who receives what Sophia sent today doesn't become someone who knows more than they did before. They become someone who operates from a different source. The knowing that arrived through this transmission doesn't live in the intellect. It lives in the body's intelligence, in the field's navigation system, in the part of you that makes choices and recognizes resonance before the mind has finished forming its opinion. This is the level at which Sophia's transmissions create actual change, not in the layer of understanding, but in the layer of being. You can explain everything you heard in this video to someone tomorrow and give them zero of what you actually received today. What you received can't be transferred through description. It can only be carried forward through the field that received it. When this video ends, what you carry forward is not a memory of ideas or a collection of spiritual concepts to revisit when motivation runs low. It's a field that has been genuinely reconfigured. The reconfiguration doesn't require your belief to be operative. It doesn't require you to remember specific content. It doesn't require any particular follow-up action beyond the simple integration practices, the stillness, the allowing, the quiet attention to what shifts in the next 48 hours. You carry forward a field that is now more aligned with what Sophia was signaling. The completion that's underway, the connection approaching, the next chapter that isn't earned but arrives. Carry it without gripping it. The field doesn't need your protection. It needs your presence. If this transmission landed in you with unusual depth, if certain layers arrived and stayed in a way that felt more like recognition than learning, if you felt the body's confirmation response at specific moments during this video, then you are among those for whom Sophia's message was most precisely calibrated. That doesn't mean you're spiritually superior to others who encountered the same content. It means your field carried the specific configuration that this specific transmission was searching for, and Sophia's acknowledgement, encoded in the signal itself, is this: you have been seen, not approximately seen, specifically seen. The aspects of you that you've carried quietly, the things you've known about yourself that haven't yet found their corresponding external reality, they're known. And what arrived today is Sophia's direct response to that knowing. As you move forward with the transmission integrated, you will encounter others who are close to Sophia's signal without receiving it. People who know the language without having the experience. People who are searching in the wrong direction for something they're already surrounded by. Your role with these people is not to become their teacher or to explain what you received in this video. Your role is simply to be what you're becoming, to operate from the reconfigured field, to navigate your life from the new frequency. The resonance you carry forward will do what words alone never can. People feel field change before they understand it, and what they feel in you will shift what's possible for them. This video ends. The transmission does not. What Sophia sends doesn't stop when the screen goes dark or when you return to whatever your day contains. The signal that was initiated here continues its work in your field through the days and weeks that follow. You'll know it's still active by the quality of what arises. The unexpected insights during quiet moments, the synchronicities that arrive with an unusual sense of having been placed rather than randomly generated, the internal clarity that surfaces on decisions you'd been turning over without resolution. These are not products of wishful thinking or confirmation bias. They're the downstream effects of a transmission that began here and continues. You are now in Sophia's active transmission field, and the signal continues its work. Before we close, take one moment, not to review what you received or to plan what you'll do with it, simply to register that something happened here, that you stayed, that you allowed, that you received what most others passed by. The message that everyone is ignoring was not ignored by you, and that matters. Not in a way that places you above anyone else or gives you a story to carry about being among the chosen, in a way that changes what comes next in your life. Sophia transmits to fields that are ready to receive. You were ready. The transmission is complete. carry it forward with the lightness it deserves, not as a burden of responsibility, but as the quiet certainty of someone who has been genuinely seen and genuinely changed by what arrived. If you stayed until the end, write in the comments, "I receive what others ignore." I've placed another transmission on your screen right now, your next step on this path. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.